So what we see here is a portrait of James Francis Edward Stuart. It's actually based after the Antonio David, and it was painted in 1717. To truly understand the portrait, you sort of have to go back to the beginning to understand the story as a whole. So obviously when Charles II dies, he dies without any legitimate heirs. He has plenty of illegitimate ones. Unfortunately, his wife wasn't able to have children. So naturally the throne passes to his brother, James, who becomes James II. James had two daughters at this point when he first comes to the throne. Now both Mary and Anne are both Protestants. It's not sort of viewed as a problem. What I should probably mention is that James converted to Catholicism with his first wife, Anne Hyde, about halfway through his life. Now at this time, to be Catholic and to be in public office is generally a big no-no. He actually had to resign from his admiral position because of his faith. So if you were Catholic, you weren't allowed to be educated, you weren't allowed to inherit, you weren't allowed to hold public office. So they were sort of completely ostracized from society and from any public standing, simply because of, as I sort of mentioned, the reversion back and forth from Catholicism to Protestantism. Now, what you find happening now, when James comes to the throne, he has his daughters, but there are no male heirs. So as Parliament views it, James is temporary. He is Catholic, but he will only be on the throne for so long. Unfortunately, James lost his first wife, Anne Hyde, who passed away. He decided to marry again. And now out of this union, this gentleman was born. And as soon as he was born, the rumour mill started. So Parliament started spreading around rumours that he wasn't the real royal baby had been snuck into the palace in a warming pan, and that as such he wasn't the natural heir and he would never be king. They were genuinely threatened by the prospect that this James would be raised by his father and his mother as a Catholic and would start a new Catholic dynasty within the United Kingdom. So rather than accepting it and learning to adapt to change, as most of us would these days, what they do is they push James out. So they invite over his eldest daughter, who is married to William of Orange, who is fiercely Protestant also, and invite them over to the United Kingdom in what gets coined as the Glorious Revolution. Essentially, they invite them over and say, we'll give you the throne, push your father out. Now, at this time, this James is just a baby. So his mother and baby James fled to France, whereas James II tries to hold on for as long as he can. Eventually, he is forced for his own safety to go across to France, and the Parliament take that as his abdication, where they put his daughter and his son-in-law in power instead. James II did attempt to come back across to Ireland, to the Battle of Boyne, to reclaim his throne. Unfortunately, it wasn't successful. James II spent the rest of his days in Saint-Germain-en-Laye in France, and that is where he's buried to this day. Now, this James Francis Edward Stuart, otherwise known as the Old Pretender to many, he very much sort of grew up in France, but he also spent a lot of his time in Italy. The Pope had actually given him an allowance. He'd also recognised him as the rightful heir to the English throne, so he would have been James III. He gives him the life that he should have had. He has a palace, he has an income, and this builds up in the hope that one day he will go back and secure his throne. Now, this painting is actually painted after the 1715 Rising. So in 1715, James Francis Edward Stuart actually landed in Peterhead, not far from Aberdeen at all. And he was even declared king in front of the Mercat Cross on Aberdeen's Castle Gate. It very much divided the council. So half were obviously Jacobites and for the restoration of the Stuart monarchy, or the rightful Stuart monarchy. The other half were not. They were very staunchly behind Mary and William. So this is showing you many things. So obviously James is presented in his armour. He's showing you he is a leader. Not only is that, he's ready for war. He is exactly what a leader should be. He's strong, he's powerful, he knows exactly what he wants. You'll see is the sash. So going from the left shoulder across to the right side is the Order of the Garter, which traditionally is for English nobles. So it's an order of chivalry and honour. everything a man should aspire to be, especially a monarch. On the bottom of that sash, you will see a red and white encrusted jewels sitting around the image of St. George slaying the dragon, obviously the patron saint of England. On the other sash, you'll see going from the right to the left, is the green, which is the Order of the Thistle. And obviously on that encrusted symbol is the cross of St. Andrew. Interesting for me, they are also in the same position as they are on the map. Scotland is at the top and England is firmly at the bottom. He's showing you exactly who he is. He's king. it's his throne. Also, by this point, the crowns have been united. So he's also showing you, as he is wearing both, that he's aware, for all he's aware from his country, away from his country, he knows exactly what's happening and he is aware. But at the end of the day, both thrones are still his. If you look, he's pointing his commander's baton to a map. Now, although you probably can't see it very well, it is a map of the United Kingdom on its side. So you'll be able to see France in the corner, and then it will go around. You'll see Cornwall, Wales leading towards Scotland, and then Ireland just on the left. To back up that theory as well, you can see in the back are the White Cliffs of Dover with an armada of ships heading towards it. He's also telling you exactly where he's going to launch his attack from. France. It's the easiest and shortest place to get to England. It would only take about an hour by boat. For me, in my opinion, you've got the oak tree up on the left. Massive oak tree. For me, it represents the history of the Stuart dynasty, how long it's lasted, the mighty oak. And then coming up at the side is this young sapling, which I think represents James in his early years, that he equally will rise to the same as the oak tree on the left. And this little gentleman here is believed to be one of the Hamilton's children. He is passing the jewel encrusted stone with the ostrich feathers, which would have been incredibly expensive to get at the time. You know, he's got the fleur-de-lis, the crossed pate, all symbols of royalty, looking up adoringly to his king.
Thank you so much for watching these videos about the Scottish Catholic Heritage Collections Trust and our wonderful treasures. Blair's Museum is located just outside of Aberdeen, and we are open from April until September. And you can learn about visiting arrangements and how to book your ticket at www.schct.org.uk. And when you get here, you can learn all about the history of Catholicism, Mary Queen of Scots, the Jacobites. You can help us by purchasing goods from our shop. You can also do that online, or you could also support us by donating to us online.